boss or someone they looked up to, and they were all. So let's accept the ripple effect story that they had actually agreed to go down there on that morning. Now, initially I didn't believe that, a lot of us didn't believe it, because there's virtually no decent CCTV or credible CCTV available of the four in London that morning, and virtually no witnesses will say they saw the four on London on that morning. You know, where are they? We live in the most CCTV city in the whole world, and how come, that's a deep mystery which I'm aiming to answer for you today. Why couldn't they show any CCTV of those four if they were really up in London? Now, what convinced me that they had really gone up to London was at the inquest, because you know the way the CCTV release looks very dodgy. Like the timestamp's been removed or fiddled with, and it's all been photoshopped. Especially the one they released at Luton at 7:21 that morning. I expect you all see it. And the four figures are there going into the station, 7:21, and it all looks right dodgy. And especially Khan, he's the figure at the back, who's got the posts from the railing going in front of him, in front of his body and in front of his head. So whoever did that, for some reason, wanted to make an incredibly bad Photoshop. Maybe just to show they could get away with it. Did a single newspaper, single British media talk about the amazingly unbelievable, you know, CCTV fiddled with image? No, they didn't. The British media will accept anything in the story. This is the ever-changing story. The stories keep changing about what's supposed to happen. And media just behave in an amnesiac manner and just printed. This is especially the case with the ever-changing story of what went bang. What was the explosive they had? I'll come to that later. Okay. So I saw at the inquest all the CCTVs which the police had of Hasib Hussain from 6 minutes to 9 at King's Cross until 22 minutes past 9. He was there pottering around, going in and out of the station, rummaging around his rucksack, going into Smith's to buy something. Then he went over the road to McDonald's, came back again. So he was definitely there over all that time. I would say he definitely was not there earlier, because they did not have any CCTV before that. I suggest that with the 7:40 train cancelled, they then got a later train, 7:40 or whatever, and they arrived about roughly after 8:30, maybe 8:45. They arrived too late to get on the trains they were scheduled to get on. Right? That's the crunch of the official story cannot ever face up to, and that is the point where the ripple effect story kicks in. Those lads came for the 7:40 train at Luton. It was cancelled. They got the late train. It went very slowly, and it got them into King's Cross too late to get on the trains they'd been told to get onto. They were wondering what to do. And then crowds started coming off as the bombs went off, and they would sort of panic and decide what to do. So I think that is, the inquest leaves us with no doubt at all that they really were there in London that morning. Okay. I am modifying the ripple effect story in one decisive manner in terms of what happened to Khan. Now, on the 5th of July, Khan Tanweer had to drive into hospital because Khan's wife had complications from a pregnancy. She was in agony, agonising pains from a pregnancy, and this again was totally unexpected. He had to take her into hospital, and based on her being in quite a bad way, he then decided he was pulling out from this terror drill. Wasn't going to do it. And he phoned up. And there was some phone call released in the inquest in which he's saying they tried to make out that he was delaying it from the 6th, postponing it. So, but I think he was pulling out of the event because of his wife, and the evidence for this is her phone call, which she gave in the only interview she's ever given. The whole of the 6th, she was desperately trying to ring her husband and not being able to get through. She describes her anguish in this interview. And on the 7th, very extraordinary synchronicity, she has a miscarriage. So it's quite young, it's a second child, and she doesn't know where her husband's gone to. She actually never sees him again after that time he takes her to the hospital. And then she has a miscarriage. I think that is acute despair that she's under, of not understanding how her loving husband can just vanish like that. And I would say that once he had decided to pull out, then the operators had a very tricky situation on their hands. He could not be allowed to live. So he would have been bumped off somewhere in Leeds, and they had to persuade the others, Sanweir, and Lindsay, to go ahead with it without Khan. I think that is why there is no trace whatever of Khan in London on that day, apart from one very obviously unreliable witness, Mr. Biddle. So the two of them drive down early in the morning, and at the service station on the M1, about 4 o'clock in the morning, there are photos of Tanweir going out, filling up with petrol, and there's testimony at the inquest from the forecourt manager of that service station, the Liddell service station, to the fact that 2 people were in that car. Okay. Now the inquest didn't make anything of that, because whenever something inconvenient happens, they just gloss it over. But I think he's in a better position than us to know how many people were in that car. He said 2 people. You can see Hassib Hussain in the front seat. He stays there as Tanweir gets out to buy the petrol. So I'm suggesting that confirms that there were just 2 of them that drove down from Leeds that morning, and they then meet up with Lindsay at Luton. Now we're now getting to the reason why they can't ever show the CCTV. They can't ever show the loads of CCTV which they've really got. They can say, oh, we've got loads of it. Remember, they kept saying that without ever showing it to us. They can't show it to us, 1, because there's only 3 people there, not 4, and 2, because they arrived too late. They're quite clearly potting around too late. Okay, well, let's have a look at the fascinating glimpse we get with Jermaine Lindsay when he turns up at Luton car park. He arrives an hour early before the others, around 5 o'clock. And what does he do? He parks his car and he nods off. So he's fast asleep, and the parking lady comes and slaps a ticket on his car and sees him fast asleep and doesn't wake him up. So that's quite a relaxed suicide bomber, isn't it? Going for the final destination. Okay. Then you see he then wakes up, and this is just about something like 10 to 7, and he then drives his car over to where they're going to meet, and you then see on the CCTV the car coming down from Leeds, coming in the back. The 2 cars are going to meet up. At the same time you see this, within seconds, you see a really smart Jaguar car parked just sort of over here, and the lights go on the Jaguar car just when that car comes to Leeds, and it starts driving around, right? And so the 2 cars come together, and then the Jaguar comes in to park right next to it, and then zoom, just the Jaguar's going to park, the CCTV switches off. Now this is a story where the CCTV always switches off when something important is going to happen, right? Mysteriously not available. Now that Jaguar, this is brilliant research by the Journalism for Truth campaign. They noticed this Jaguar in the CCTV pictures, right? And they noticed that there was a so-called dry run, which 3 of the 4 had done on the week before, 28th of June. About 8:30 they arrive at Luton, okay?